I realized that today during the demo I may not have adequately covered how to make the muscles, so I wanted to show you that very quickly. This is not the exact model, but I'm using it because it is in the correct location, meaning it's centered along 0 at the z-axis. Alright, turn off the floor object. We're going to drop this to the canvas and then clear the canvas. Get the sphere, hit T to make it editable, do make polymesh, and under deformation, under geometry, we're going to go to Dynamesh, and we can choose a low setting, maybe 16 to start with. And notice it hasn't done it because it hasn't changed. And so if I change it even by a little bit, it should, the Dynamesh should take effect. There we go. Alright, so with that model active, I'm going to show you a slightly different mechanism that I showed you today. I just hit, let's see here. To make it symmetrical, let me see what the right way to do this is. So it's at 0, 0. I think if we just, if we turn Z on, Z symmetry, so activate symmetry, X, turn Z on, and I can just hit the Z key to toggle that. Let's try this. Let's just move it out like this. This is just to show you there's more than one way to do it. And then we're going to hide this group of polygons in the center. All right. Modify, delete hidden, and then Dynamesh again, and it makes two even symmetrical things. So let's do this. Let's take that, go back to our original idealized model, and we're going to append this model. And these are going to become our iliacus muscles. Select them, just smoothing them down. I could probably just scale them, you know, that'd be faster. And it doesn't, with Dynamesh, it doesn't really matter what they look like, because we're just going to squash them into place. As long as symmetry is turned on, it should do them both evenly. Oops, it's too low resolution. Let's go to here and turn that to 32. That looks good. I'm just using the move brush. And I don't really have to worry about, so long as I know Z is turned on and it's working, I don't really have to keep looking at the other model. I just know that it's going into the correct position. Right? And again, I'm reactivating Dynamesh by just command dragging outside the model, and it just basically tells Dynamesh to reinterpret the model. So now what I want to do is I want to rotate the bottom half of this so it basically changes its aspect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the rotate tool. I'm going to hold down command as I drag out my line. And you can see what it's doing is it's making a mask. Right? And follow me on this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this model and drag down. And when I do, it's going to spin the bottom part of this model like this. And then I'm going to draw a new transform line. Notice it didn't affect the mask. Do it again. So now it's doing it around a slightly different axis. Is that right? Well, I think that's right. That's what meaning I think that's what I want to do. And I'm going to rotate it back this way. Back over that way. And that's basically what we want the thing to look like. Again, when you see it change shape like that, if you watch up here to the move tool, you'll see the smooth brush activate, and that just means that I'm holding down the shift key. If I want to move something straight towards me or straight out along the normals, I hold down the option key, and if I click and drag, it moves it straight out along its normals. All right, so what I want now is I want to start seeing muscle color, but I'm changing the material on the bone in the background, and I don't really want that. I want the bone to really look like bone. So I'm going to fill the bone with a color, RGB, not mRGB and not M, at 100% color fill object, meaning I'm filling it with white and this material. Oh, I need to fill it with that material too, actually. Actually, no, I don't need to fill it with that material. I can stick with this material for the time being. But, well, I could fill it with that material. So fill object, and that's the skeleton up here. Now when because I filled it, now when I switch to a red color, it will only affect that. And I can switch to a different material like skin shaded. And so now the material on the bone is the skeleton color, and down here it's the muscle color, and it just kind of gives me a better feel for what the muscle is supposed to really look like as I'm working on it. And I showed you resymmetry today in the class, and if we could do all this on one of them and just do the same process like we did in class, and it would look the same. I still haven't taken the time to actually look at this muscle and see what it does. But I know it doesn't interfere with the pelvis like that, so I need to move it out of the way. It actually probably does that, come to think of it. Probably comes straight down there along that line. That looks much better to me. Yeah. I don't know, I just thought it'd be useful for you to see me do this and to have a little movie of it being done. And we're getting to the point where we're ready to get rid of the basic shape and end up with a slightly more refined shape. I'm going to take the flatten tool and try to flatten some, well, let me get the move tool and move this out because it's intersecting there a little bit. Looks pretty good to me. And so now we're ready to subdivide this model a little bit. And because it's working symmetrically, I can work on either side of the model, whichever is convenient. It'll update on the other side. That's not right. That doesn't do that. That goes up there. Remembering this a little bit more as I do it. Yeah, something like that. All right, now we're going to subdivide. So right now our active points are just 1,000. If we go under geometry, there are no subdivisions. So we're going to do divide, 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 and that's really not that many. We can do it one more time. So now we have 5 levels of subdivision. We could step that back down and go through and do the UV master, but I think I've already shown you that, so there's no sense in doing it again here. So let's go up here, and again, let's say I wanted to fill the bottom of this in a gradient with a color. The best way to do that, notice if I do the gradient, the mask thing, if I go to draw a mask, on a low resolution, like this, this is at a very low resolution, right? We see this, right? We get a very smooth transition. But what happens if we are at a high level of subdivision when we go to make a mask by command dragging? We get a very crisp line, and it's difficult to make it smooth. Why is that? Because it's doing it based on the number of vertices. It's only smoothing it one polygroup, one polygonal distance at a time. Well, if we switch back down to the lower subdivisions like this, where there are very few subdivisions, when we go to do that same thing and we draw out a mask by holding down command to get a gradual mask, it's much more gradual and it's much easier to make it blurred because it's there are fewer polygons to worry about. So it's a little trick. All right, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to, and I'm going to hide that mask so you can't see it. I'm going to go up to the higher subdivision level and I'm going to pick a fascial color to fill that with. Actually, I take that back. I hadn't filled it with any color. So let's go through and fill this with whatever color we want for the muscle, something like that. Switch back down to the lower subdivision, make a mask. And again, we go down to the lower subdivision to make a nice smooth mask, something like that. And then we can switch to a color, this light blue color, maybe even lighter than that. Color fill, and that will be the fascia. All right, something like that. And then we'll keep that blue color active. We'll bring up the BDS. We'll bring up the damn standard brush, and we'll turn color on, turn color down to something like that. And so now, when we go through and draw the striations in the muscle, we have something like this. I think I want more depth and less color right now. And it happens on both sides because we have symmetry turned on. And again, if I wanted to reposition this muscle, because I don't like the way it sits on the femoral head right there, the right way to do it is to go down to the lowest subdivision level to move it. And that way you'll move it gradually. Now when I hold down Shift and I go to smooth, I can smooth the geometry and the color, or if I turn this off, holding down Shift, now I'm just going to smooth the color, right? Or if I turn that off and turn this on, then I'm just going to smooth the geometry and the color stays the same. And if they're both turned on, I smooth both of them at the same time. I almost never want to smooth the color. I tend to paint the color and just use smooth for the geometry. I think that's what most people do. So let's move. Yeah, something like that. It still doesn't really look right, but I think it's close. It doesn't really matter either. I'm just trying to show you how you would sculpt something organically while you're, looking at it, making your best guess. And the cool thing is that all that movement and smoothing that we did doesn't really affect the higher resolution model, so all that detail is still there. And I can bring up the standard brush, turn on freehand, and use one of these brushes to do more of the striations at one time. And here you'd want to turn the opacity down more, because you really don't want it to be overstated. You want it to be pretty subtle. And it's supposed to be on, is that right? Z-add, is that what I want? Probably Z-sub. Let's see here. most of this is just figuring out what works. It's not in building a masterpiece. It's figuring out which trick works. A lot of back and forth, a lot of undoing and redoing. And this, we could make another subdivision of this, but in general, the number of subdivisions is not what makes the model really good. It's the careful sculpting that really pays off. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah, and so one other thing I wanted to show you was the stroke, the lazy mouse. You can turn lazy mouse on, and you can see there's a little red thing trailing the mouse there when I paint. Well, if you go to lazy radius and turn that up, and what it does is it evens out your strokes. Let's turn it way up and you'll really see it. And if you ever need to draw, it's really good if you ever find yourself working with a mouse, because it really straightens out your stroke. And what it means is the stroke takes the average of those number of strokes before it acts. So if we wanted to make sure we painted these straighter, we could do it that way. We could turn lazy mouse on. Surprised Photoshop doesn't have this kind of functionality, because that's really where you need it the most. Alright, so that looks pretty good. It's intersecting there a little bit, but you can see how you could go through and build some geometry and end up with a pretty cool model in the end. Alright, BFA will bring up the flatten tool, and the way we're going to use that is we're going to go through and mask by cavity. I'm going to hide that. So the mask is still active, it's just hidden. And now I'm going to go through and do a deformation. And deformations are really like filters in Photoshop. So I like that, but it's too strong. So see what it looks like now. Maybe if we make it a little bit softer and try it. I think that looks pretty good. BFA. So that's going to be the flatten brush. I'm going to turn color off. I've tried this before with muscle and liked the effect that I got from it. David had a way of painting muscle fibers so that they were kind of flat in profile, and I always liked the way they looked. Yeah, something like that. And then we need to fix this thing up here at the edge, and we really need to get that to... You're never going to make it look seamless, because it's not going to fade out and be transparent where you really need it to be transparent. I've got the flatten brush now, and I'm going to try to flatten some of this out. And the nice thing about working on this low resolution is that it won't really affect our high resolution details all that much. Got the move tool now. And again, if here I'm just dragging, moving, right? That's just moving. But if, let's say I wanted this to come straight towards me or straight away from me, if I hold down Option and then I click and drag to the right, it comes towards us. And if I drag away from us, drag to the left, it goes down into the model. And I've got Option held down the whole time. So I haven't described that until now, but I've probably been doing it all along. That's something I use quite a bit. So, and again, the principle is that you do all this to the low resolution, and then when you step up to the high resolution, it's maintained all your detail. Again, it's another one of those things that makes ZBrush really forgiving, that you can save all of that. Or if you have all that detail done in another model, you can you can always save it, make another model, put it in the right place, and then project that detail back into it. So that's basically what I showed you in class, but I thought it might be good to have it as a tutorial in case you needed to see it. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Okay, thanks.